This is Seth Rowland, president of Basha Systems. This video tour gives you a taste under the hood of GhostFill. It is for advanced programmers, and it will show you some tips and some tricks of how to use GhostFill to drive other applications as part of a workflow and document assembly process, and how GhostFill can be integrated and driven by other applications as a document assembly server. Let us start with the interface. GhostFill ships with an end-user view, which is what you see here, which can be branded with backdrops and labels, and you can determine which folders would be visible. You have the ability to click through navigation style, or you could display the complete contents as a scrollable list with hyperlinks. In addition, there is a find function where you can search for a particular template. You can access answer sets that people have used for particular documents. You can see documents that have been created through a mini document management system. You can access profile variables and load and remove profiles that put in names such as fee earners and lawyer name, or a range of other different options. You have access to tools so that you can change your preferences, what you want to do with templates, whether you just want to run them. For documents, you can choose whether your output is in Word, WordPerfect, or Word Viewer. Same too for your plain text document viewer. There are certain options that you can change for the way dialogues function, as well as use of data card and various other code completion issues. There is a very helpful online help guide that explains each of the objects in the GhostFill interface and what their parameters and functions are. What we're going to do here is actually go under the hood and look at this system. If you were to have purchased the Developer Edition, you would have the ability to click on the Developer button, and you now have access to an editor. The editor is divided into 3 tabs: Templates, Documents, and Data Objects. The templates can be PDF files, they can be regular DOT files, or they can be RTF files. In addition, they can also be HTML or HTML files. To open a template, you would simply right-click and click Open, and it would open in your word processor or the appropriate editor. A GhostFill template is simply a Word, text, or HTML, RTF, or WordPerfect file that contains a series of instructions. When assembled through the GhostFill environment with the GhostFill filler, it will then parse the variables in the document and produce the required result. GhostFill ships with a toolbar in Word that gives you access to the Explorer, to a clause picker, to a filler, to certain functions for jumping to fill points, adding new fill points, testing the template, access a fill point editor for changes, and some various markup wizards. We have separately designed a toolbar to provide context-sensitive color coding as part of our GhostFill templates. The main focus of this particular video tour is to stress the connectivity and the ability to dynamically control the GhostFill interface. We'll start with a simple template that stops during a session and allows you to come out to Outlook and select a particular record. Let's double-click this time to run the template. The system will launch Outlook and go to either your default address book or a designated address book, depending upon the script. You would simply select the record you want and click OK, and there it brings the data and assembles the document. Now let's take a brief look at that template and see how it did it. We open the template, and you'll notice the GhostFill fill points. The first fill point is just a format function for the date, but the key and critical one is that there is an Outlook connector built into the GhostFill library that allows you to select a folder in Outlook, define an object, which is the selected item, and then access that object in the template, bringing in the full name, address, and other name. If I ran a single line fill, you could see this in action. Let's do single step at a time. Step 1. Step 2 brings us the Outlook connector. We select the item. The object now exists. Step 3 brings us the name property, then the business address, and then the first name. We could just as well put that in a repeating loop and allowed for selections of multiple items, or we could have passed some filter parameter through to Outlook so that it showed a particular address book filtered for some particular search string. Let's look at some other examples. Say we had, instead of an Outlook address book, we had an address or a database with a series of tables and information. We could go through that and run an assembly which calls out not to Outlook, but instead to a database. The database would show up. We can look at it in grid view. We can look at it in form view. It has a wizard, which is an ODBC connector. We can run searches through the particular database, searching by starting with, not equal, less than, ends with, contains. And there's my clopper, the one who did it. Once we've chosen a record, we can hit select, and then takes that data and fills in the document. Let's look under the hood. We can open up the template. We have our database connector, and we can now run it. I'm going to run my single step fill, and on the next step it sends me back out to my selection options, and I can select the record. It remembers in memory my last search. I can simply reset the search. My database selector is up and running. I can choose the record I want. Click select. It's now sitting in memory. It's brought in the first field. There's my formatted date. Lynn Brown is at a particular firm. We bring in her address. We can bring in her greeting. Now here we're not only just bringing in the merge field, but we're actually putting a rule that tests against the value of the data, whether or not a person is a VIP or not. We'll continue the step through. If the person is a VIP, then we bring in the first text. If they are not, then we bring in the second. And it finishes all the fill points and brings us the completed letter. In the alternative to an ODBC data link, you can also connect to GhostFill through ADO. In this particular sample, I've taken a whole letter and defined it as a block. So it takes fields from RS, and the scripting occurs down below. We set the various states. We create an object, which is our ADO connection. We define the string, and we tell it to open, and then we pass it the SQL statement to select, in this case, all records from contacts. We could just as well have put some search or other criteria at this point. What I'm going to show you as I run through this is not only are we setting, but we're going to read from the database, generate a GhostFill list dynamically from the selected records, post that into a dialog, and use that to continue through the record set, including filtering a particular record. So let's start at the top here, and we'll do single-step fill. We've now set our block, and it's put that whole letter in memory. We've popped up a little GhostFill message box just to tell you what's coming next. We're going to run the string to pull data from the database. We'll run it one step at a time, setting various parameters. We're going to create the connection object. We're going to create the record set out of that object. We'll define the data source. We'll tell it to open. We will check whether that data source is open in fact, pass it a SQL string, and then actually open it. That's now set into memory. It's not going to ask us because we told it to give everything. And we tell GhostFill to repeat through that database, through that record set, running that particular letter until it gets to the end of the record set. If we step through, you'll notice it's brought in the letter and it's passing the fields of the first few people in the letter. It finds another record, it brings in the second record. It finds another record and it brings that person in. Until it gets to the end of the statement and there are no more records. It could just as easily, if this were done, is a rich text format template produced 5,000 records probably within about a minute. The next thing we have is we're going to actually use the ODBC to generate a dynamic list on the fly. I'll click the next button. Next step, run datalink creates the list. We'll step again. And so now it is looping through the record set, building the list in memory. It keeps checking. Now it is taking that list, and that list is invoked by a dialog answer set. We're going to now launch that answer set. We've launched the dialog. A few things we'll note. It actually has pulled onto this dialog some environmental variables on your computer, such as the current date, who you're logged in as, and what the name of your computer is. We've actually generated this list and we're displaying in two different ways. We can produce a letter just for Charles or Charles and Peter. Separately, we can select a particular client, display the data from the database in the dialog, and we can set it up so that you can revise the data and on a submit button through ADO pass the changes on the record set back into the database. Let's click Fill now. We're back at our document, and there's still some fill points left to go through. We have all our various letters and everything else. So let's continue stepping through. We're now going to take the data that we pulled from that dialog answer set. Here we have our selected clients from that dialog set. And we're going to then loop through the record set to bring out just those selected clients. There's our list of clients, and now we're looping through, and we're getting the two clients that we selected from that list. Now, how is that being done? You've seen the scripts in the template, but what there also exist a series of scripts inside the dialog. So if we were to open up the dialog dynamic list, you have a field editor to handle the layout and display, to add additional fields, change their properties, source, formatting, dependencies, a whole range of options which we won't get into on this thing. But what I want to talk to you about is the event scripting. Click on events and you have access to the on change, on enter, on exit of individual fields, and a series of on load, on initialization of the dialog itself. And what we've done is we've created an on enter script which sets the value of a particular variable in the system, in this case the welcome, and passes it a series of parameters and carriage returns, including calls out to environmental variables. Separately, we have an onload script which calls a whole script which determines the hide, show, and the dependency structure of the document. We have buttons that call other scripts which perform various other functions, such as the ADO and database call. And we have other display scripts. From the event editor, I can access any particular script. If I want to get the dynamic events list, I can call out to the scripts plugin, find my events list, which has various commands to disable certain fields unless certain conditions are met. We can also deal with display functions that will actually set various values based upon a call out to a data link, based upon a filter criteria. And you have a whole range of editing in this tool with quick fill as you're typing various fields based upon object types. GhostFill is not limited to data sources that sit on a particular hard drive or on a server. GhostFill can invoke web services and gather data that either goes straight into the document or can be used to populate fields on a particular GhostFill dialog. In this case, we have accessed a web service for calculating zip code or determining the city associated with a particular zip code. So let's run this. When the dialog appears, we give the user a selection of web service that they might want. Here we would get the city based upon a zip code. If I put 10520, I will get Croton-on-Hudson, which is the zip code where Basha Systems is based. Alternatively, I could actually enter Croton-on-Hudson, click Submit City, and it will return the zip code 10520. You could even have a particular web service which just brings in some raw data without parsing it. What's going on under the hood is a single script on the Submit button which controls the web services and tells it what to do with them. In this particular case, we are asking which web service do you want based upon city, zip, or quote. It creates an object in a SOAP client, passes the result, and then it runs an XML build from string utility to parse that result and turn that into data on this particular dialog. While GhostFill can access a myriad set of data sources, it can also control other programs. There is a sample that ships with it where we can do a connection to a spreadsheet which is manipulated via GhostFill. So if I run the assemble on this particular document, here we're doing single step fill. Notice we're going to create an Excel application object. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to open the workbook in memory. We're going to select from that spreadsheet in memory a particular range, in this case B3. That is now in memory. In memory, we can now manipulate it like any other GhostFill object, so we can make the text uppercase. But we can go beyond because that object is now open, and we can run any of the properties or objects, parameters or functions that can be run with that set. So in this case, we can actually set the value of that cell, and we can now make Excel visible. You'll notice we've changed that value of B3 and we've written to Excel. If we continue, we will remove it from visibility, and you'll notice it's no longer in my switcher, task switcher. I can then close the workbook. It's still active in memory. In this case, I'm not going to save the changes. And I'm finished with the document. This is a very simple illustrative function. It can run embedded scripts for, any program that can be registered as an object in the environment and pass data from GhostFill right into that environment. The final example revolves around running GhostFill in silent mode. Basically, all aspects of GhostFill can be addressed through COM or through a web services with a .NET wrapper directly. This particular template, which I'm going to open now, is going to be run entirely off Excel data with no GhostFill dialogues, and I can even run it with GhostFill entirely closed. As you can see, GhostFill is entirely closed. And what we want to do, and this is just an illustration of how GhostFill can be automated externally, is we're simply going to select a record, and based upon that selection, we're going to produce a document. Here's our document. It's ran Peter Ivy. It's brought in his data. It's ran whether they're a VIP. It says if you were a VIP and he was not. We go back to Excel and choose someone who is a VIP. And now we have Janet and we have alternate text. So it can serve as an incredibly high-powered report writer off data, or the two processes can be blended together into one whole. Under the hood is real simple. In this case, let's open up the VB editor. When we open the command button click function on the particular sheet, you'll see we simply are dimensioning a range as the selected cells. We're dimensioning GhostFill as GF as an object and creating it off the Explorer server, GF Explorer server. And then we're setting variables on the variables component based upon the particular range. And then we're simply calling the template to go run with those variables currently in memory. We return to the live record set. We can select a new record, modify it, loop it, click, and there's your new document. we return to GhostFill. And in GhostFill, there's a range of all sorts of other functions. I encourage you to look at our other videos, which are demonstrations of completed applications. This tour has been rather technical and focused on what goes on under the hood, and merely begins to touch on the potential of what GhostFill can do in building a fully integrated application to handle complex data and document answer sets, and blending it into a very powerful workflow operation. Thank you for listening.